The MMORPG has gained a reputation of being quite possibly the most intense genre of game, and for good reason. They're easily the most time-consuming, holding various grinds and low percentage drops that encourage the same repetitive activity over and over for months, or for some, even years. Combine this with the fact that they never end. It's not uncommon these days for players to have several years of playtime accumulated in one single game, with a substantial portion of that time dedicated to certain items or rewards that would leave most rational people mystified of their obsessiveness. World of Warcraft, being a staple of the genre, is no different. So join me today as we begin a series of videos covering the most unhinged, craziest, obsessed, spectacular, and maybe even the most toxic moments in its history. But do you know what isn't toxic? Becoming a back-end developer with their premier learning platform, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a learning platform that offers hands-on lessons in Python, SQL, and Go. It's very interactive. Instead of just reading about it or watching a video, it actually gets you coding day one with real projects. And it also motivates you in this very RPG-like way with experience, levels, achievements, quests, bosses, and all while learning how to code. The median salary for backend developers in the US in 2024 was over $100,000. And since I know you guys are such big fans of the MMO, it's also pretty safe to guess that the basement is your most natural and comfortable environment, which is good because programmers often work remotely. So you can be like me and never have light touch your skin. But if you do crave some social interaction, there is an active Discord community to reach out to if you ever have trouble in any of the lessons, as well as the AI-powered bear, Boots. And if you're unsure, they also offer a 30-day no questions asked refund policy. So if it piqued your interest, there's no harm in trying. Try it today at boot.dev and use my code MadSeasonShow to get 25% off your entire first year on the annual plan. Starting off with a little bit of crazy, we have the original Rank 14 grind. When World of Warcraft released in 2004, it was without a PvP system. Players could attack each other in the open world on PvP servers, and also on PvE if they manually flagged or attacked a faction NPC, but it was solely for the fun of it. You didn't get any form of ranking, you couldn't loot other players. There's purity in its simplicity, in the sense that the satisfaction came purely from making someone else's day worse. But when patch 1.4 came out in April of 2005, several months after its release, it debuted the honor system, and not too long after in patch 1.5, two battlegrounds, the Warsong Gulch and Altaric Valley, and in 1.7 the Arathi Basin. So all of a sudden there is a structure and reward system. There were now 14 ranks of progression, and from killing other players you would now gain an honorable kill and be awarded a currency called honor. The amount of honor gained would depend on a couple of factors, including the rank of the enemy player relative to your rank, as well as if you had help or not. On a weekly basis, all of this honor would be accumulated and counted for every player of your faction. These players would then be given ranks, ordered from the most to the least amount of honor obtained, and depending on where you placed, and the total amount of participating PvPers on your server of your faction, you would be put into certain brackets which awarded a certain amount of ranking points. And finally, it would be these ranking points is what determined how much you progressed or regressed through this rank 14 system. At face value is a fairly simple idea, which boiled down to, if you want to rank up, you have to place relatively high in the list of active PvPers on your server for your faction. However, as simple as that sounds, it is known today as one of the most hardcore, no-life, grindiest, drama-laden features that has ever released in any MMORPG ever, for the simple fact that the amount of time that you needed to invest was equal to the sweatiest poop socks within your faction. The MMORPG attracts people of many backgrounds. You have the casual gamer dad who just logs on the weekends and maybe runs a dungeon or two. You have the little kid who trolls trade chat and invariably plays an undead rogue. You have the fully grown adult who trolls trade chat and invariably plays a human warrior. And, of course, the poop sock The person whose daily routine is to roll out of their bed, lacking a frame and box spring, hasn't changed their sheets in over a year, if they even have any sheets, and are probably locked in the soul-crushing grips of depression. They log into World of Warcraft, they queue for Warsong Gulch for 18 hours, then go to bed, and rinse and repeat. And before you think I'm shitting on people, I actually lived this life. The one minor difference being I did Arathi Basin instead of Warsong Gulch, because Arathi Basin is superior because you don't have those situations where you have both teams turtling and then it goes on for 3 hours unless you AFK. I also have a box spring. It isn't just the sheer amount of time that's required to reach the end, but it's also the consistency, as at any point if you choose to go outside and you fail to play, in some cases sometimes for even a day, you stand the risk of losing weeks of progress. It is by far one of the most intense no-life systems ever to be implemented in any MMORPG ever. Depending on how many people are participating on your faction, there are only a certain amount of spaces per bracket, and the higher rank that you get, the more ranking points are required, not only to progress, but also to even just maintain your rank. You always decay ranking points on a weekly basis, and it's percentage based, meaning that the higher rank you are, the more you decay, which equates to the higher upkeep. So as intense as it is, it becomes even more intense the higher rank that you achieve. There's 100% the sunken cost fallacy that sets in pretty quickly, because if you suddenly decide to choose not to PvP or something happens in your personal life, you lose rank, and you lose all of the time you've invested for weeks or months. No one wants to be the person who got 2 pieces of the purple PvP set. Once you get to a certain point, it's like, well, there's no turning back now. It's time to put your foot on the gas, commit, ditch the girlfriend on the incredibly small chance that you had one already, and push it to the fucking limit. Wake up, PvP for 18 hours, sleep, repeat. The burnout is intense, and it's something of a meme within the community that the first thing that people do when they reach rank 14 is quit the game and never play it again. Or at the very least, never PvP again. People account share all the time, which Blizzard infamously lets slide on a regular basis, so unless you want to cheat, that's just even more time commitment. And all of this doesn't even take into account the social aspect. Since it is such an intense grind, what communities would often do is to try to organize the brackets. Communities would form together and direct players to farm a very specific amount of honor on a weekly basis to land in these certain brackets. Access to this highly autistic club was gained by PvPing enough to threaten this predetermined order of brackets, at which point someone would whisper you to join a Discord event or whatever they used back in 2005. Once you're in, you would be assigned a certain amount of honor to farm, and you would stop at that number exactly. And if you failed to comply, you would become what is known as a bracket breaker, which would essentially set the entire PvP community against you. You wouldn't be invited to pre-made groups, and any pre-made group that would invite you would be blacklisted themselves. This is considered the worst sin in the PvP community, and repercussions range from in-game harassment to sabotage. I know in my server in Classic 2019 there was such a bracket breaker, and what happened was that someone actually pretended to befriend them for the better part of 2 months in order to gain their trust. The bracket breaker queued Warsong Gulch over and over at the Alliance entrance in Ashenvale for some reason, and once the saboteur gained their trust one day, as they were in a match, they gathered a number of NPC civilians from the nearby Horde hub and kited them to this Alliance entrance, and timed it such that when the bracket breaker finished their match, they killed this horde of civilian NPCs, which would immediately derank both they and the bracket breaker, which of course erased hundreds of hours of investment in the blink of an eye. As sociopathic as all that was, it was actually quite effective, as the bracket breaker never logged in again. Earning these slots often meant mandatory participation in what were called pool parties, where someone would get a character of the opposite faction and walk to a graveyard somewhere near a starting zone and take resurrection sickness over and over while getting killed by a player of your faction. And what you would do is you would have the entire PvP community in this bracket system make level 1 characters, join the party, and stay within range until they reached 25 honor kills, which was the minimum requirement to be counted as an active PvPer for that week. By doing this, the amount of players that fit into each bracket were increased, thus allowing for more ranking points and faster ranking for everyone. Beyond this, there are the classic spicy PvP death threats, real-life harassment, and all sorts of crazy shit. I think that I may have had a particularly spicy time, considering that I ranked on Fairlina in 2019 Classic, which even from before release was considered to be the Mos Eisley of servers.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
It was a streamer server, so it was incredibly competitive. But even still, from 2004 to 2026, the Rank 14 system to this day goes down as one of the most intense, degenerate, toxic systems that has ever graced the MMORPG genre. And so much to the point that in recent re-releases, Blizzard has nerfed it into the Weenie Hut Junior version where rank never decays, which means that players could eventually reach this coveted rank 14 without sacrificing their social life in the process. What a bunch of casuals. Vanilla World of Warcraft in a lot of ways represents the Wild West of the MMORPG. The class balance is almost non-existent. There are low-level items that are some of the most coveted endgame, and it's filled with a ton of RPG elements that today are seen as clunky and archaic. But for many, these are the exact reasons why they play it. The entire game wasn't covered in bubble wrap. There were little to no rules, and compared to today, players would have a lot of freedom within the world. However, for the next entry, some would say maybe a little too much freedom, as we have city griefing. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. You're just minding your own business, using the auction house, and then, holy shit, dragon, ah! I have to first mention the OG, and that's the Doomlord Kha'Zix. This is something that the 2019 run didn't experience, but up until patch 2.0 in the original Vanilla World of Warcraft, there was a world boss in the Blasted Lands known as Doomlord Kha'Zix. He'd eventually moved to the Outland, where he became an outdoor raid boss over there in the Hellfire Peninsula, assigning his subordinate High Lord Cruel to take his place. But Kha'Zix makes the list as one of the many bosses that people would kite to Stormwind. What made him extra dangerous was his Shadow Bolt volley, which, if it killed a player, would heal him. So between the continuously spawning low-level NPCs and unsuspecting players, once he was in the city, there was no killing him. He would rampage all around, bodies would pile up, trade chat would go crazy, and it would go on until a GM specifically intervened and ejected him from the city. This would be a regular occurrence until a hotfix was implemented to leash him back after a certain distance from his spawn point in the Blasted Lands, making him the only NPC in the game at the time to have this special rule. But he would go down as one of the first major city-clearing incidents in the game's history, and as it would turn out, it would be followed by many others. More commonly, there's Teramis the Devourer from the same zone. This is actually a rare spawn that you're supposed to kill with the group, and if you're successful, you would receive one of those blue Draenithis orbs that you could trade in for a rare item. However, most Alliance know him as a returning nuisance, as bored hunters will invariably eventually kite him to Stormwind, where he'll use his AoE Fire Breath to take out any unsuspecting players. Unlike Kha'Zix, he was not a raid boss, so once enough high-level players were aware of his presence, he was usually taken down pretty quickly, which is good because Blizzard, of course, no longer has any humans working as GMs. In 2005, the Guild Goon Squad did the same thing to Orgrimmar with Jaina Proudmoore, who would rack up kills with her AoE blizzards. They also found an interesting strategy to AoE farm Alliance players by gathering everyone up with a flask of petrification, and then resurrecting all at once and spamming AoEs to rack up some quick honor. Also in Orgrimmar, we have Gammon, who's become something of a meme in the game. He was part of a rogue quest where you needed to pickpocket him, but there was a glitch to where if a priest would mind control him and brought him to the auction house, he would annoyingly boot everybody out of the interface. Blizzard eventually fixed it by making him a high-level elite that's immune to mind control. He also had Geddon's Bomb from the Molten Core. This is, of course, the big timed AoE bomb that he would put on raid members, and they have to run away from the raid group in order to not blow them up. But what guilds would do is they would sometimes summon someone who got the bomb into the auction house or any other densely populated area to blow people up. Beyond this, you also, of course, had the Blood Plague from zul'gurub, which somebody would get on their pet, dismissed it, and then resummoned it in a major city where it would then spread. Kind of like a test run for the whole COVID thing. It was something that kind of took over every single server as it became uninhabitable for low-level players in particular. But whatever the case was, player city griefing led to some of the most memorable and crazy moments in the game's history. A term used quite often in the MMO is DPS, short for damage per second. It's a stat that's used to gauge the consistency of damage during a single fight. With bosses, it can range, but generally it's around several minutes. Anyone who's ever played the genre knows it, but what about DPH? Damage per hour. In what insane world are fights so long that you would ever need to use this stat? Next, we're taking a field trip to the world of Final Fantasy XI. Yeah, I know the video's titled World of Warcraft, but I'm gonna cheat because it's a cool story and talk about a boss that a guild was engaged for a total of 18 hours, which is the Pandemonium Warden. Although 2008 certainly wasn't the birth of the genre, you can still find a lot of unorthodox things within it. In Final Fantasy XI, it was no different, and one boss in particular, the Pandemonium Warden, would make headlines with how difficult it was. This was a Tier 5 Zenny NM boss. Yeah. Oh, you don't know what that is? Casual. Nah, don't worry, I don't either. I have no idea how this game works, but from what I can tell, NM is short for Notorious Monster, which were plot-related, quest-based NPCs within the game. They were extra difficult mobs with higher stats and special attacks. They awarded exclusive loot, and they also spawned rarely within the world. It transformed between a whopping 11 forms. Yeah, remember Dragon Ball Z where the big bad had like 3 different forms? Well, this one had 10, along with its base form, all of which you had to defeat in order to kill it. Each form change spawned these supporting lamp mobs that each had 25,000 HP with regeneration. You needed to have 3 tanks. One tank would constantly kite the lamps around, and yeah, okay, I don't think anybody has the context to understand any of this shit, so I'll just summarize it. It's pretty fucking hard. He had 11 forms, insane health, and it took forever. It would hit headlines around the internet in 2008 when a guild of 36 players marathoned him for 18 hours. They didn't substitute out. As explained by one of the members, they played for the full 18 hours as adrenaline took over, and when they failed to claim the kill and the adrenaline wore off, they became physically ill as they began to faint and vomit. Imagine not only fainting during a boss, but also waking up covered in your own vomit, only to find that you failed to kill it. Yeah, this was still relatively the early days in the MMO genre, and so it was still largely experimental. Sometimes when developers made a boss, they would just arbitrarily assign it insane health, give it a few unique abilities, maybe a unique model or a palette swap, then call it a day. If the players could kill it, cool. And if they couldn't, that's also cool because it meant even more time investment to get better gear so that they could eventually kill it. In fact, it was better because it meant more months of subscription. But in this instance, it would spawn this huge wave of news articles, and it actually launched studies on the addictive and unhealthy nature of the MMORPG genre, which caused Square Enix, the developer of the game, to send an in-game message upon every time you logged in that they do not wish to see lives suffer as a result of extensive play, as well as nerfing the Pandemonium Warden along with other bosses, as they quite clearly feared incoming lawsuits in this intriguing early era of the MMO. But that about does it for this episode. This whole subject is an immense can of worms, and this is just scratching the surface. There's no way I could do it all in one video. It'd be 12 hours long. I do plan on returning, not just to World of Warcraft, but other MMOs as well, so if you enjoyed the video, stay tuned for more. I want this to be a long-running series for the channel. Thank you for watching this episode. Like it if you liked it, because I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.